A group of trucks carrying goods were leisurely traveling on the icy road, but they did not know that the ice was silently melting. But before they could discover it, the black man's car suddenly had an accident and died in the middle of the road. The group quickly connected the 3 cars into a long chain, intending to pull the dead Karen, but the ice surface at this time was no longer a place to trust. Under the enormous weight, each piece of ice began to crack as fragile as glass. Finally, a deafening cracking sound rang out as the ice surface could not bear the pressure and collapsed. Worse, the engineer's ankle was tightly tied to the car by a tow rope. Before he could untee it, the entire car was submerged, pulling the 2 cars in front of him to slide hard toward the edge of the crack. Knowing that if he hesitated, the entire convoy would be dragged down with him, he resolutely ordered the woman, who was with him, also the youngest in the group, to use a knife to cut the tether. Although her heart ached, the woman was still forced to act. In that decisive moment, she only had time to see him being pulled into the cold water that was chilling to the bone. No one had time to grieve. The ice surface continued to break. The cracks spread as fast as a spider web. The group hurriedly jumped on their bikes and pedaled at full throttle, starting a life-or-death race with the icy death. After the chaos when the last car flipped over in the middle of the ice, everyone thought that disaster had struck. But when the survivors climbed out of the cabin one by one, they were surprised to find that the crackshads stopped right in front of them. The driver quickly understood the cause of the car's overturning, causing the weight to be evenly distributed to the entire chassis, no longer on the 4 wheels as before. Thanks to that, the ice surface stabilized again. A little luck in the middle of the white nightmare, but they knew that this journey was still very far from reaching the so-called safety. The story begins under the cold sky of northern Canada when the white snow covered all the paths and the wind howled in gusts. A diamond mine still operated quietly in the harshness. Inside, when everything seemed to be still peaceful, the safety officer suddenly discovered something unusual: the methane. The gas sensor had been disabled. He immediately called the workers to check, but before he could do anything, a huge explosion rang out. The pillars in the tunnel flew up like matchsticks. The entire mine shook. The workers panicked and ran away. But just a small spark from friction between the iron rod and the gas pipe was enough to detonate the entire area. The tunnel mouth collapsed completely, burying 26 people under the cold ground. Immediately after the accident, the management rushed to find a rescue plan. However, the amount of methane gas had not been determined, making the use of explosives a double-edged sword. They immediately contacted the Air Force to request the transport of a special gas suction head to extract the methane first, to control the risk of explosion. However, when they learned that this device weighed up to 30 tons, the Army immediately refused because no aircraft could withstand such a load. There is just one option to transport by truck through the ice field that has been closed to traffic from Jackma. And the only person who can undertake this crazy trip is Jim, a veteran transport boss who is familiar with every corner of this place. Although he knows this adventure is no different from signing a suicide note because April ice melts every day, when thinking of the 26 lives that are desperate underground, Jim grits his teeth and nods. But to ensure success, Jim needs at least 2 more experienced drivers. The first person he thinks of is the native girl Tantuhu, used to rebel in a rights protection organization and is currently in custody. Jim puts up $50 bail for her and recounts the tragedy of the mine collapse. Without thinking, Tant immediately agrees to participate because her brother is trapped underground. The third person at this time is Mike, a driver who has just finished a shipment and is angry because the career insulting his younger brother Woody Kusihu fought in the Middle East. Woody has PTSD syndrome and cannot speak when insulted too much. Mike threw a punch, causing his colleague to fall asleep on the spot and leading to the 2 brothers being fired. Mike intended to take his brother to the hospital for treatment, but after 2 hours he discovered the doctor had only prescribed antidepressants and left him to sit alone. Too angry, Mike smashed the medicine bottle and dragged his brother out of the hospital. While stopping at the gas station, Mike's eyes were drawn to the passing trucks. which lit up a dream he had long hidden. Woody understood that his brother had quietly handed over a flyer selling trucks, but Mike just tore it up. Harsh. Reality did not allow for dreaming. At that moment, the phone rang with an urgent recruitment of runway drivers. Without hesitating, Mike decided to seize the opportunity. The two brothers hurriedly went to the transportation center. Among the long line of candidates who were all too old or inexperienced, they quickly stood out. After checking the resume and skills, Jim judged Mike to be the right person, but he was still unsure about Goody, so he took them both into the garage. Without a word, Goody opened the toolbox and acted with the skill of a skilled worker, completely changing Jim's view and deciding to hire them both. Soon after, Tantu was also at the garage. If the trip was successful, they would split the $200,000 bonus, also accompanying Tom, insurance agent responsible for risk assessment. After careful preparation, the 3 trucks left the garage crossing the Dangerous, as Jim estimated the journey would take at least 23 hours. But Tantu warned that the old bridge from the 1960s at the end of the road might not be able to withstand the vehicles. However, time was running out. Jim could not hesitate. After the blockade was lifted, the convoy embarked on the fateful journey. The night fell. The brilliant aurora borealis crossed the sky like a divine silk ribbon, making the group excited that everything would go smoothly. But when the sun appeared, the ice began to melt silently. Jim sensed something was wrong and was horrified to discover the temperature gauge had jumped. His car had stalled in the middle of the road. Mike immediately turned back to save the person. The 3 vehicles were connected into a chain to pull Jim out, but the temperature increased. The ice surface gradually thinned and finally cracked, unable to bear the heavy weight. Worse, Jim's ankle was hooked on the winch rope that had not been released in time. The car was dragged down, dragging the 2 cars in front down. Realizing that if he hesitated any longer, the entire mission would fail, Jim called Tantu to order the rope to be cut. Tantu painfully watched his teammate being swept into the cold water. But no one had time to grieve. The ice surface continued to crack. Everyone quickly jumped on their bikes and sped away as if fleeing death. Mike and his team had just escaped when they discovered the crack had stopped in front of the car. Because the car was overturned, the load was evenly distributed, helping the ice surface stabilize. But Tom couldn't bear the shock of being asked to turn back immediately. Mike just sneered because the ice surface would be thinner on the way back. Meanwhile, a snowstorm ahead would make the ice layer thicker. Now there was only one choice to move forward. But at that moment, Tom suddenly changed his tone. He gently reminded Mike that Tantu had been fired by Jim. Now suddenly turning back was very suspicious. Alertness arose. Mike questioned Tantu. This person confessed that he had been fired for using a public vehicle to pull Zoe's gang to protest on the weekend. But Mike didn't believe it because Jim's car had not run 10,000 miles. So why did it suddenly break down? Unless someone had misfueled. Tom then continued. He had seen Tantu sneaking around Jim's gas tank. Mike suspected that Tantu might want to monopolize the bonus. Enraged, Tantu pulled out a gun to control the situation, but Guti from behind disarmed him. Mike decided to tie Tantu and use a winch to pull the 2 vehicles closer. After stabilizing, Mike contacted the transport company to verify whether Tantu's brother was really trapped. Meanwhile, in the mine, tensions rose as some workers began to suggest reducing the number of people to save oxygen. The safety staff strongly objected, saying that this was murder. But the group of workers still coldly pointed at the weak ones and said that they had to be eliminated to survive. A person started typing the Moses Code out, but the leader did not dare to make a decision, so the workers could only choose. At the same time, a snowstorm came and swallowed 2 trucks. Mike and Guti intended to continue their journey, but when they entered, the door suddenly locked. Tom smiled coldly and locked them both inside. He transferred all the supplies to another truck. Tantu saw and immediately realized that Tom was the one who killed Jim. He was not an insurance agent, but a hired assassin to destroy the rescue equipment, prevent the convoy from reaching the entrance of the tunnel. Tom knocked Tantu out, pulled out a bundle of explosives, placed them under Mike and Goody's car, lit the fuse, and left in the swirling white snow. In the critical situation, Mike suddenly realized that there was a thermal skin in the car. In a flash of idea, he and Guti had just taken a large steel plate similar to the kind used in palaces and used all their strength to hit the thermal skin. The metallic sound rang out. A large hole appeared. Without hesitation, both of them rushed out of the truck and threw the explosives that were counting down far away. Although they avoided a direct disaster, the fierce destruction still shattered the surface. The truck's wheels sank deep into the icy water pit. All equipment was lost. The two brothers now had only each other to cling to. Not giving up, they immediately drilled through the ice and inserted a steel pipe connected to the hydraulic winch to pull the car out of the pit. Under the good coordination, the front of the car was slowly lifted. But at that moment, Goody suddenly disconnected the winch. The device had reached its limit of bearing capacity, just a little more, and it would be destroyed. Mike was impatient. Regardless of the danger, dangerously turned on the winch. Goody disconnected again. Mike lost control and threw a punch straight at his younger brother's face. His brother growled, "Because you always stick to the rules, you've been fired over and over again." The words were like a knife slashing into Goody's heart. He remained silent and didn't stop anymore, letting Mike do as he pleased. Mike immediately pressed the accelerator and finally pulled the car out of the hole. But as expected, the winch rope broke and flew straight at Goody. The car's trunk sank immediately into the icy water. When Mike regained consciousness, he only saw Goody's head floating on this. In extreme panic, he tightened the rope and turned around, recklessly plunging into the bone-chilling water. After a while of diving in despair, Mike finally pulled Goody to shore. No more strength. Never give up. Mike gave up and pulled Goody into the car, continuously compressing his heart to give him breath. When Goody breathed again, his eyes opened, Mike burst into tears like a child, both joyful and constantly apologizing. From that moment, the transport mission was no longer a responsibility. It had become a personal threat. Mike vowed to make Tom pay the price. Meanwhile, thinking that Mike had lost his life, Tom drove into the mountains and was welcomed by the mine management. It turned out that he was the mastermind behind all the plot to cover up the accident with a perfect drama. When he learned that Tantu was still alive in the car, the management coldly ordered Tom to drive down the mountain, creating a fake scene that the car lost control and plunged into the abyss in order to create a tragic rescue to fool the public. In the mine, the situation was as tense as a string. A leader worker gathered many people to pressure the safety staff to eliminate the weak people and blame the management. This made the safety staff suspicious and questioned the relationship between the group of miners and the management. At that moment, Aminer, lying motionless, suddenly opened his mouth to reveal the truth, that the management had secretly cut off the methane gas sensor to avoid being suspended from production in exchange for each person $100. The safety staff were stunned and could not believe that for such a small amount, they would trade their lives. The leader continued to press the request to vote if more than half would start to eliminate people. The tension escalated. The security staff suddenly pulled out a lighter and declared that if anyone dared to act, he would light the fuse and detonate the methane gas, killing everyone. This psychological attack made the crowd freeze, and no one dared to act rashly. The plan was abandoned in silence. Just as the mine had just calmed down, Tom led the car to the back of the mountain, intending to finish off Tantu. He bent down to call Tantu to wake up to say goodbye. Suddenly hearing a strange noise behind him, it was the pet mouse that Goody had hidden in his pocket. Tom curiously reached out to check and was bitten painfully. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Tantu kicked him accurately, throwing him off the car and quickly escaped. The driver ran away. Tom crawled up and grabbed the car step, but was powerless to tear off the oil pipe and rolled to one side. In the angry, he snatched the pickup truck of his subordinates, crazily chased Tantu, saw everything through the rearview mirror, and immediately used the walkie-talkie to call for help. Luckily, Mike and Goody had just entered the mountains. When they heard the news, the two speeded up and rushed to the rescue. Unexpectedly, the two Mike brothers were still alive. Tom panicked, ordered all the henchmen to deal with. They emphasized not to shoot, must fake the accident scene. In just a moment, 4 men approached the truck. 2 men jumped on both sides of the door, drew their guns, threatened Mike to stop. But Mike was astute to realize that if they didn't dare to shoot, it meant they were afraid of being discovered. He told Goody to open the door, then he turned the wheel and shook it hard to throw them out. But this group was not easy to deal with. One man had already gotten into the trunk of the car. Mike said that he was determined, but was still controlled by 2 others and forced to fall. In a split second, Mike launched a strong kick, knocking one of them away, and he was run over by Thegent Wheel. Goody struggled to stand up. Just as he was about to breathe, the other man rushed to the neck, but he didn't expect that he had been a soldier on the battlefield. She rose up and counterattacked fiercely, using her helmet to repeatedly hit her opponent's head, then locked his neck tightly. This man fell unconscious. At that moment, the truck turned back. Mike threw the last body out and turned to smile at his younger brother. But the danger ahead was not yet over. Tantu's car ran out of fuel and was forced to stop in the middle of the mountain road. He quickly pulled out his gun and shot at Tom to stop the pursuit. At that moment, Mike came in like a whirlwind and performed a skillful drift. The wheels screeched on the ice. Seeing the unfavorable situation, Tom immediately jumped into the pickup truck and fled. But before he could get far, Mike crashed into the abyss. The truth was finally revealed. Mike stepped down and sincerely apologized to Tantu for the misunderstandings in the past. Goody immediately reconnected the oil pipe and was ready to continue the journey. But the 3 did not know that Tom was not dead yet. He dragged himself out of the scrap metal, took his younger brother's snowmobile, and crossed the snow-covered mountain peak. From above, he observed the position of the 3 people below, quickly buried explosives in the snow. A shocking explosion sounded on the mountain face, shaking violently. Mike immediately realized it was an avalanche. Without hesitation, he and Tantu got into the car and ran away. The 2 had just escaped when a large mass of snow fell down and buried Tantu. They turned back to look and discovered a tree branch stuck in Tantu's body. Fortunately, it did not hit a vital spot. Mike quickly pulled the branch out with Goody to give first aid and pulled Tantu into the car. But Tantu did not have enough strength to continue driving. With no other choice, the 2 brothers cleared the eye. Snow reattached the truck and continued to pull back with their own car, carrying the last fragile hope. But Tom, like an immortal devil, appeared again. He had fixed the front of the car and quickly followed. Through the rearview mirror, Mike saw him approaching and immediately turned the wheel to stop. But at the wide stretch, Tom still crashed into the side of their car, trying to force all 3 of them to fall into the abyss. Mike knew clearly that if he didn't stop Tom, the last well would be a raced wipeout. He borrowed a gun. Tantu told Goody to take the car to the mine at all costs. Then he crawled out of the cab, aiming at the car Tom. But the gun had only 2 bullets left. Both missed the target. There was no way to retreat. Mike risked jumping to the front of the opponent's car and rolling on the ice with Tom. As a driver, Mike was no match for a man who had killed and silenced people like Tom. He was knocked down by punches as soon as they met. Tom didn't bother to finish him off, just rushed after the car in front with the intention of destroying everything. Mike got up, delivered a fatal kick, and then rushed into a life-and-death fight right on the ice. The 2 struggled to rush forward, in the cold wind biting their skin. Mike jumped into the car first, but Tom also immediately got in from the other side. The 2 continued to struggle in the cabin. The ice in front began to shake like ocean waves. Mike secretly understood that this ice was about to break, so he stepped on the gas pedal all the way and jumped out of the car. Before Tom could react, The front of the car was sucked into the cold water, dragging him away forever. At the same time, Goody and Tantu also reached the old bridge that had existed for decades. Goody hesitated, but Tantu volunteered to drive the car over. When the car got onto the bridge, the road surface slipped because of the ice and could not move forward. Goody immediately jumped down and spread out the anti-skid mats so that each wheel could pass. Just as their wheel left the bridge, the old structure could not bear the weight. The entire bridge collapsed and fell to pieces. Before he could celebrate, the car started to slide back. Goody turned around, locked the back door, determined to keep his promise to his brother, refusing to leave. Tantu tried to accelerate, but the car did not budge. And then the car slid down, crushing Goody under dozens of tons of steel. The younger brother had risked his life to save the last well. Mike rushed to the CINEHUB to find Goody gasping in his arms. He hugged his younger brother tightly and kept crying and apologizing. But it was all too late. At the same time, the general manager and the Minister of Natural Resources arrived at the scene. The two managers pretended to be regretful and mumbled that they had tried their best. But before they could finish speaking, the truck carrying the well rushed straight into the mine. A worker immediately pressed the alarm bell to call for help from his teammates. Thanks to the timely vacuum of methane gas, the tunnel door was broken and all the trapped workers were saved. Tantu and Mike hugged each other and burst into tears in the joy of reunion. The safety staff brought the evidence to the general director. He angrily yelled at the two managers for disregarding human life. Mike stepped forward without saying a word and punched a man who was demanding justice for Jim and Goody in the face. Everything was finally concluded. The Minister of Natural Resources came up to shake Mike's hand, thanked him for saving 6 lives, and presented him with a book of commendation. Just then, a medical staff came up and reported that he had an object in his person, a flyer of the truck that he had assembled. Mike was speechless, his eyes red. He is determined to fulfill his brother's last wish. 3 months later, Tantu becomes the new boss to replace Jim. Mike buys his dream truck. After a respectful farewell, he climbs into his beloved car carrying Goody's last wish and begins a new journey full of ambition and hope. The movie ends here. How did you find the movie? Comment below. Goodbye and see you again.